Hi, in this and the next video I'm going to be talking about creating and using arrays. So in this one we're going to talk about how to declare arrays, how to access array elements, and then how to use loops to access array elements. So it's going to be kind of long. So an array is created by declaring it and then providing the number of elements you want in the array. So for example, if I want an array of 10 elements, which is just similar to a vector but fixed in size. If I want an array of 10 elements, I'm going to write it like so. Int numbers, and we just say sub 10. Okay. However, I'm going to teach this right off the bat. Because arrays are fixed in size, there's often situations where you have to provide a variable or a constant that represents the size. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to always declare my variables that way. So I'm going to create a constant num elements, and then I'm going to define or declare my array with that constant, which is a much better way to do your coding. Any data type will work. You can have 10 names. We can have 10, and I'm just using this as an example. It can be as many or as few as you want. Okay, so that's the general way that you declare an array, is by the data type, the name of the array, and the number of elements you want in the array. Now there is an alternative way to do this. If you already know the data that you want to put into the array, just like with vectors, you can create an initialization list. Oops. I'm not very imaginative today, so we're just going to use the numbers 1 through 10. Okay. And when you do that, then the compiler will automatically assign those data values into the array. Now, I almost hesitate to show you this, but I will. If you provide a list like this, you can actually leave the number out of the square brackets to represent the number of elements in the array, because the compiler will count as it assigns, and that will be the size of the array. But we always carry a constant around with us with the size, so just do that. But be aware that if you ever read code, you may see it done differently. Okay, so the way we access array elements is by using subscript notation and the subscript operator. So, for example, the first element is going to be numbers sub 0. I'm sorry. There. Okay, so let's run that just to make sure we're on the right track. Oops, there we go. So I left a curly brace in from something else. Let's try it again. There we go. So the first element is 1. Okay, so if I want to sum these, I could do it like that. Let's not do it all. Let's do the first 3. Oops. Whoops again. There we go. So let's display it as we go. And the first 3 is 6. 1 plus 2 plus 3 is indeed 6. Okay, so array notation, subscript operator, and the element that you want to access. So a lot of times you're going to want to access all the elements of an array. So we can do that using a for loop in 2 different ways. One way is to do it with what's called indexed access, like we just did, and the other way is called using a range loop. So let's take a look at that. So let's total all these up just to see what the total is. So we're going to say for int I equals 0, that's the first element, I less than num elements. This is why we declare that constant, so that we can use it in our for loops and in other things to let the compiler know when to stop. So we don't want I to get to 10, because remember, the array elements, just like vectors, The first element 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the last element is position 9, which is the number of elements minus 1, or n minus 1. Okay, so we don't want it to get to 10. That takes us outside the end of the array. We want it to stop at 9, so I less than 10. I plus plus, and then total plus equal numbers sub I to add each number of the array into total. And then we can say cout. The total is total, and then a new line. Should get 55, and we do. The total is 55. Alright, so we can also do the same thing with a simpler and safer range for loop. For int number n numbers, that's a colon, but I like to say n, total plus equal number, and then cout. Oh, let's just copy that. Control C, Control V. Okay, so we ought to see two totals of 55. And indeed we do. But that way you can see a little bit better. There you go. When you're accessing every element of an array, the range for loop is preferred. Just because you're less likely to make a mistake. It's easy to read, it's easy to understand, it's fast, and it's just definitely the best way to do it. So you can choose either loop, but if you're going to access every element from first to last, the best way to do that is to use a range for loop. Now, if you're going to access them from last to first, you could not do that with the range for loop, and for what you know now, you'd have to use a indexed for loop. So that wraps up this lesson on declaring arrays and accessing array elements. And in the next video, the last one in this series on arrays, we're going to talk about arrays as function arguments and a little bit about two-dimensional arrays. So see you there.